please help me in bringing out Joan Hoxsey.
For the last bit of time with all of these wonderful storytellers, trying to figure out how I fit in. I thought it might be the slutty dress. I knew it wasn't the tattoo or the physicist. I knew we weren't going to make it on that ground. My story is a little different, I think. It's about my family of origin. It starts really for me, in terms of this particular story, in 1929. Now, that's not the year I graduated from high school. I know, the slutty dress just... In 1929, the stock exchange crashed, the stock market crashed, ushering in what we would all learn to know as the Great Depression. My mother and dad were living in Minneapolis, Minnesota with their 4 children. My sister Mary Therese, who was a newborn, Jimmy, who was 1, Tommy, who was 2, and Danny, who was 6. They had just bought their first house. And knowing my mother, I am just sure that she had dreamed that house over and over and over again. She was a frugal person in many ways, but she had great taste. And she always loved her home and loved to bring beauty into the home, even sometimes just a bouquet of flowers. My dad was selling insurance. There was in the Depression this thing they called $1 a month insurance. And what it was is that the salesman would go door to door and sell the policy, and then the same salesman would come back every month to collect the dollar for that month. What my mom didn't know was that some of those dollars were finding their way into my dad's pocket. She had no idea of that until late one afternoon when she was getting ready for dinner, she got a telegram that was sent by my dad as he skipped town. The telegram read, "Having financial difficulties, will send for you and the children." So my mom was just devastated, you can imagine. Here she was with these 3 very small babies and her son Dan, who was suddenly now the man of the house, and he did very well at that. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. And when Mary Therese was 8 months old, she took ill very suddenly and was dead within a few hours of spinal meningitis. I can only imagine the depth of my mother's pain. That tragedy was followed very shortly thereafter by the death of my Dutch immigrant grandmother, who was very special to my mom. Mom lost the house, of course, and moved into one room with a curtain separating the sleeping quarters from the living quarters of the living space. Even there, my mom's ingenuity and love of beauty shone very clearly. She took that curtain and made it look like a stage backdrop. And the little boys would get up in front of that stage and say their recitations and their ABCs and the little plays that they made up. So Mother really tried everything she could think of to find out where my dad was. She'd written to the 48, now that's how old I am, 48 state governors asking for help in finding my dad, with no reply. When Dad had been gone almost 2 years, Mother got a letter from the Napa County, California jail. It was from my dad, begging her to take him back. And it was really, somebody said earlier about carrying shame. I've carried the shame of that jail for many years. But anyway, Dad was begging Mom to come back home. He was facing a jail term. What had happened is that he'd been picked up for public drunkenness. And they went to release him the next morning, as they did with people who had that happen. And it turned out that he had a warrant for his arrest out for desertion. So the California governor really had done something for Mom. I don't think that there was even the slightest chance that my mother thought about not taking my dad back. He was dearly loved by my mother. He was a kind of Clark Gable look-alike. And my mother was just very desperately in love with him, but she also needed help. So Dad came home, and things were fairly stable for a while. In fact, that's when I come into the picture. I was born on February 14th, 1937, not 29. 1937. When I was 3, we moved from Minneapolis to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which is where my dad grew up. When I was 4, the Second World War broke out. Mom and Dad weren't doing very well. We knew that because we would be wakened in the middle of the night with loud arguments. They never lasted very long. Dad would slam out of the house. Mother would come and get me, and we would try to follow Dad wherever he was going. And it's only been really as an adult that I've understood that she was in a case of high anxiety every time he left the house. One night, in fact, he did not come home. So Mother was, it's hard to explain as a child what it's like to see your mother in such terrible pain. So as I had before, the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months. And Dad had been gone about 9 months when we discovered through the mail an allotment check. An allotment check came from my dad. He had landed up in the Azores Islands. He was working as a hod carrier for a construction company that was building an airfield in the Azores. So she finally had some idea of where he was. When I look back at it, I think my mom probably felt the most financially able that she ever had. She had the allotment check. She had gone back to work and had a small salary. And she had rented every room in the house out. She and I slept in the living room, and my brothers slept in the garage. We had an air base outside of Sioux Falls, and the airmen had been told that if they could find a room in the city, in the town, that they could have their wives come and be with them. And so that was full advantage of that taken by my mom. We even moved a family into the basement. Mother whitewashed it, and Wanda Sue and her parents lived there. Don't know who Wanda Sue is, I don't remember. My mother, as I said before, loved beautiful things, and on her way to work every day, she would pass a furniture store, and in the window from the furniture store, she saw these 2 beautiful chairs. They were called Gainsborough chairs, and they were covered with a beautiful floral fabric. And Mother, I have to say, lusted after those chairs. So one day she went in, and if she loved the chairs, she adored the picture, the Raphael copy of the mother and the child that was on the wall. Now in those days, in the olden days, we didn't have credit, but we did have layaway. So Mother put the 2 chairs and the picture of the Madonna and the child, Madonna in the chair it's actually called, on layaway, and paid a few dollars every payday until they came home. When those chairs and that picture of the Madonna came home into our little living room, It was just like Christmas for me. And I was so taken by how beautiful they were. And I realized that I had been feeling for a long time that there was something wrong with us because we lived at 121 and a half. It was the only house. It was a beautiful neighborhood, really. But this house was up behind a house behind a house, and I had felt really, a certain shame about that. So these beautiful chairs and this gorgeous picture hanging on the living room wall were really special, and they made me feel like I was good as anybody who had a whole number. My dad came home from the war. We ended up moving to Salem, Oregon, where my mother's brother lived. Mother and Dad had gone back to Sioux Falls to get the things from the house packed and sent by the movers to Salem. And when she came back to Salem, she said, that it was just really strange that the Madonna, the picture of the Madonna fit perfectly into a barrel, the barrel they were using to move our things. And it just was kind of coincidental. Well, we looked that up and we discovered that the picture had in fact been originally painted on a barrel top. So that made me even more proud. So the furniture came. Mother had talked an executor of an estate into renting us a house that had been vacant for at least 10 years. The owner of the house had been institutionalized and they'd never done anything with the house. And Mother convinced them that we should have that house, we should rent it. It was a mess. So when we finally moved in, we scrubbed it from the attic to the basement. And we're ready for those beautiful chairs when they came with the mover, and we moved them right into the living room, and there was no Madonna. Where's the picture of the Madonna? Did it come in something else? No, the picture is not here. And finally we just gave up looking for the Madonna because it had been lost in shipping. Mother and I looked for years. My dad died in 1953. I graduated from high school in 1955 and decided to go to Seattle University because I could work a full-time job and go to school at the same time. I got a job at the Bon Marché in downtown Seattle. And across the street from the Bon Marché was a Catholic bookstore. And one day I needed a particular book, and I thought maybe they have that book across the street. So I took my break and went over to check that out. And I nearly fainted when I walked into the store. Here was the Mother in the chair, the Madonna in the chair hanging on the wall. And they had layaway. I put the picture on layaway and paid a few dollars out of my wage every week, and finally was able to bring the picture home to my mother. Mother was so excited. She took the picture immediately and put it up on the living room wall. And it hung in every living room in every house that she lived in until she died at age 94. Now the Madonna lives with me. I pass her every day, and I take a look and I think of all of those things my mom and my dad too went through. I'm reminded of my mother. She was not a perfect mother. She was difficult in many ways. She'd been deeply wounded by her life circumstance and by my dad. But she taught me a lot of important things. One of the most important is that people need bread and roses.